The last part of the high top installation is framing the interior and finishing it out. So I'm going to use 2x2 framing and 1/4 inch plywood to frame out the inside, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, here's my materials. So I've got a bunch of 2x2s and some 1/4 inch ply. The framing is going to go along the top and the walls, and this 1/4 inch ply should bend to accommodate all of my funky curves. So I think I'll be able to run it straight from ceiling down. We'll find out. First thing I did was a little bit of mold remediation. So I just sprayed some mold armor to deal with some of the spots that have a little mold, so that I'm not sealing those into insulation. So I let that sit overnight, and it is all sterilized and ready for framing. I'm starting just by sanding where the framing is going to get epoxied to, just to roughen up the interior surface. Alright, I've got some framing pieces cut, and I'm going to glue them up. Not sure how I'm going to hold them in place, so I'm going to test with 2 and see how they go. I'm using US Composites epoxy and aerosol as a thickener, and this will make like a glue, basically, that I can adhere those with. I'm not going to film mixing this because I don't want to get epoxy all over my camera, but basically it's 4:1 resin and harden, mix that real good with a stir stick, and then mix in the aerosol, which is a glass powder, and until it's about the consistency of mayonnaise, and then smear it on there and stick. Alright, I've got one piece of framing glued in with epoxy, and I'm not too happy with how it's sitting. It took an enormous amount of adhesive, and it's not sitting very flush. So I think I'm going to try bonding another one with some Liquid Nails Extreme, and then I'm going to compare them tomorrow and just see how they do, and I'm not going to worry about it tonight. So I'm back to check out the results of my test of epoxy versus Liquid Nails Extreme, and here's what I found. The adhesion appears pretty good on my epoxy piece. It is really locked on there. The problem that I've got with epoxy is that its initial adhesion takes so long that I don't think I'm going to be able to use it on the ceiling. So it is the clear winner in terms of strength with every test, but it's impractical for these vertical surfaces. So I got to figure out something else. Over here I've got Liquid Nails Extreme. I used an entire tube. Now about 12 hours later, it is still wet to the touch and moves. It says 24 hours to full cure, so I'm not super impressed with that. I did a whole bunch of research, and I found that this stuff here, Loctite PL8X, is the strongest adhesive in a bunch of tests that you can find elsewhere on YouTube. So I'm going to use this stuff. Now it's a fast grab, and I'm concerned that it's not quite going to have the adhesion for the ceiling, so I'm going to use a combo with Loctite Power Grab Ultimate. So I'm going to use a little bit of this, which is a 0-second instant grab, on either end of my boards with some PL8X in the middle. And then what I'll do is run a fillet of epoxy along anything that I think needs to be reinforced. And that trifecta should hold my framing really, really securely. Well, it sure stuck much better than the other ones. Doesn't seem to be sagging at all. That's pretty encouraging. Well, I'm laying this on this tube, and I had a unfortunate blowout on my Loctite tube. So that's a real bummer. See if I can tape it up and salvage it. Well, let's see if that works. Looks like it's holding. Barely. Oh, nope. Blew right through. So while I was sticking some of these other pieces of framing, my test piece with the Liquid Nails Extreme fell off. So super unimpressed with the product there, and I'm gonna have to now do a lot of messy cleanup and hopefully get something to adhere where that was. The Loctite combo seems to be working quite well, and I've got framing on the walls and ceiling. I still have to finish out the ends and the ups and downs, cross members, etc. But overall, this is looking pretty good. Well, I've had 3 tubes of Loctite blow out, so that's not super cool. And I've been able to get all the product out of them, but this last one, because I wasn't going to use the whole tube right away, it's just going to be a waste. So that's about $10 loss. But I got all the framing done, and it's looking pretty good. Ready for insulation and paneling. After letting the framing cure, I gave these things a good firm shake and twist to see how well they cured, and I couldn't pull them off with easy tension from my fingers, but I can't really get over my distrust of hardware store adhesives, so I went ahead and did some reinforcements with glass in a couple of key spots on the framing members. So I just did a little bit of glass glued in with epoxy resin, and that's just going to help reinforce the members of framing that are most critical in terms of holding the ceiling up. And now next thing I have to do is just some insulation and then framing. Now I ordered Thinsulate from Nomadic Supply, but it's going to take about a week for it to get here. So in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of insulation where the Thinsulate's going to be too thick, just using some of those foam rolls that I bought off of Amazon or off of AliExpress. And then I'll start cutting framing panels and running wiring for the solar and max fan, so that when the Thinsulate arrives, I'll have the panels all done. I can glue in the Thinsulate, screw in the panels, and do some trim, and we'll be all done. I'm starting in on the interior finish using 1/4 inch plywood, and I've cut a couple of pieces. The ends are in, and now working on the sides. I am just dry fitting these currently, and then I'll insulate behind once the Thinsulate arrives. The interior finish on the topper's coming along. I've got all the sides dry fitted, and just need to cut the ceiling. Now that I've got all the interior paneling cut and dry fit, it's time to do some insulation. I ordered a giant roll of Thinsulate from Nomadic Supply, and I'm cutting and fitting those today. Let me show you what it looks like. So I ordered this 30-foot roll of 3M Thinsulate, and I'll put a link in the description. This stuff ships packed, and it will inflate to about 2 inches, 1.75 inches when it's fully unrolled. And what I'm working on now is just measuring out all of the interior panels and then cutting pieces to fit. So for example, I've cut this piece to fit up front here, and then I'll fit these in just like so. And to adhere these, I'm going to be using 3M spray adhesive. Now, I went ahead and bought the California low VOC version because I've used this stuff in enclosed spaces, and fortunately I've got a absolutely beautiful day here today, but I expected to be doing this in the rain. And if you're doing this inside in a van, the low VOC stuff, I think it's going to adhere just fine, and it's way easier on the lungs and brain. So I'm going to start cutting and adhering this stuff. I've got the front compartment all insulated, and I'm going to start putting in paneling. 30 linear feet's a lot of insulation. I just cut and stuck the long strips along the side, and boy, they look good. And I filled in down below with loose wool. Should be toasty when we're done. Meanwhile, I've got the wiring pre-run for the puck lighting, so I'm gonna tie into the switch with this 14 gauge wire. That cable runs down through the framing under the side of the van and over here to this dimmer switch, which is then tied in via another cable that runs all the way around over to here and ties into a second dimmer. So once I finish out the interior, I'll have two switches that can control the overhead puck lighting. I finished all the insulation in the topper. So I've got everything glued, all the little nooks and crannies are filled, and now it's time to put the paneling back up. Paneling is all installed. I have a bunch of trimming to do to seal up the gaps and some additional pieces to cut for the front, but we are in good shape for the time being. Also got the puck lighting installed. So I've got 6 puck lights on this dimmer. So if I press, we can go down to very dim and back to bright. That's equally controlled by this secondary dimmer. Really happy with our results here. Now I just gotta clean up this mess. I'm gonna hold off finishing the topper interior with trim and paint until I complete the rest of the build, so I'll have access in the meantime to run wiring or mount additional stuff like a backup camera or awning. But it's solid, warm, and quiet for the time being. Having a high-top van has been a long-term goal of mine for over a decade, and it's amazing to finally be able to stand up inside. I also gained an enormous amount of storage by leaving the old roof in place over the cab and bed. Once I complete the rest of the interior build, this van will be vastly more comfortable than the old low-top E350 that I lived in for a few seasons years ago. I hope this video was helpful to you. If so, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to find the rest of my videos on the high-top installation. And leave a comment if there's anything in particular that you have questions on or would like to see going forward. As always, there are links in the description to the products I used. Thanks for watching. See you next time.